I'm ready when you guys are.
Thank you.
Ready.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So today is Monday, November 9th, 2020. We're at the Share Advisory Committee meeting on Zoom. We're starting today at 5:33 p.m. And so Rochelle, are you doing roll call again? Yes.
As far as I know.
Okay.
Kelly, I just pulled the list off of our, the share page.
For sure.
But yeah, I'll just do it tonight and then we'll figure that out, Kelly. I'm sorry.
No, don't worry.
Okay, we ready?
Yes, please.
Okay. Sarah Kaiser.
Here.
Lydia DeFlorio.
Here.
I know, I see you all. Sylvia Gonzalez. Absent. Tanya Hayes.
Yes, here.
Kelly Roper.
Here.
Manny Magana. Where'd he go?
I am here.
Okay. Andrea
here.
Thompson.
I'm here.
Ashley Wade.
Here.
And Rabbi Benjamin Zober.
Here.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Very exciting. Thank you. So moving on to item 1.03, action to adopt the agenda. Items on the agenda may be taken out of order. Right. Do we have a motion to adopt our agenda tonight?
Ashley, let's make sure there's no
I
public
move that
comment
we.
Oh,
this
I'm
agenda.
sorry. Sorry. Is there public comment
on the agenda item.
on the agenda item 1.03, adopting our agenda?
Not on specific to 1.03, but we did receive 2 public comments.
And Sarah, do you think we should just listen to them now, or?
Luis, we should go over those at the very end in the general public comment and we'll just say their names and that they were received.
Will do.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay, do we have a motion to adopt this agenda? My dog just opened my door.
I, Sarah Kaiser, move that we adopt the
I
agenda.
motion to adopt it.
Thank you. So on motion by Sarah, seconded by Manny Magana, all in favor of adopting this agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 2.10, approval of the minute or possible approval of the minutes from our meeting on October 12th. Is there any discussion on this?
Good to me.
On the
I
minutes.
look at them.
There is a correction that needs to be made on the minutes. As far as who was in attendance, Sylvia Gonzalez needs to be noted that she was absent.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Further discussion? Okay. And Luis, have we received public comment on this?
On the minutes?
Yes.
No.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm ready to entertain a motion to adopt. Sounds like with that correction that Sylvia needs to be marked as not in attendance last time.
I second the motion.
Someone needs to.
I can make the motion. I, Andrea Thompson, make a motion that we adopt the minutes with the one correction that Sylvia is absent on October 12th.
Thank you, Andrea.
I second the motion.
Thank you. So on our motion by Andrea, second by Manny, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oh, Lydia, thumbs
Aye.
up. That's tricky. You're showing off now. Any opposed? Okay, so we've adopted the minutes from the October 12th meeting unanimously. Wonderful. So I think we're excited to get into the meat of this meeting here. Yeah. Okay. So item 2.03 is presentation and discussion of the 7th grade curriculum. Thank you, Rochelle. I'm going to go close my door again.
Okay. Are we ready for sharing screen? Yeah, okay. Okay, can you all see it? Okay.
Yes.
Same thing, y'all know the drill. This lesson topic is healthy relationships, boundaries, and consent. I did include the triggering statement that we had in 8th grade. The content of this lesson may be triggering for some students. Objectives: use healthy and respectful ways to express friendships, attraction, and affection. Demonstrate how to ask for help from parents, other trusted adults, or friends when feeling pressured. Describe strategies for refusing unwanted advances. Explain the meaning of consent. Support and encourage safe, respectful, and responsible relationships. Excuse me. Activities. There are 2 videos as far as activities: Teen Voices, Friendships and Boundaries. Setting and respecting boundary activity or boundaries activity. The other video, what makes a relationship healthy, and then a relationship bill of rights. The lesson intro is the exact same as the others. So are we okay if I just skip over that piece? Okay. And then jumping right on into the lesson, today we're going to talk about healthy relationships, boundaries, and consent. So obviously starting with slide 2, what is a relationship? Again, we're always giving the teacher autonomy on how they want to go through the questions or group their kids. And as we know, there will be no grouping right now. So I think it's awesome that we give our teachers so much freedom how to arrange and do these lessons. So what's a relationship? The way in which 2 or more people are connected. Moving on, what is a relationship and what makes it healthy? So brainstorming different types of relationships. So having that conversation and then bringing up the slide: friendships, dating relationships, family members, teammates, classmates. Those are just some key ones. Of course, students might have a much larger list to add. Moving on to healthy relationships depend on healthy communication, healthy boundaries, mutual respect, support for one another, and checking in with each other's needs regularly while also giving each other space and privacy. And, these doesn't necessarily all have to be around dating relationships when we're looking at this. Kelly, I remember way back, you said it was so important too that we're talking about friendships as we're going through lessons on healthy relationships. And as we go down in age, we're probably going to have a little bit more friendship, but 7th grade, starting to date a little bit. So it's kind of that, crossing in, but still good skills. Setting healthy boundaries. Teacher questions. Have you ever had to ask someone not to do something? How did it make you feel? Have to say no. How did it make you feel to have to say no? How did the other person or people respond? And then moving on to slide 6. Since so many of you spend so much time texting and on social media platforms, we're going to watch a short video on friendships and boundaries that relate to those areas, which our kids do spend so much time on those platforms. Today, we're going to talk about setting and respecting boundaries in our relationships. Similar to what we just watched on the video, boundaries are the guidelines, rules, and limits each person has for themselves to keep them safe, healthy, and respected. We're covering this topic to support you to develop skills to have healthy and equitable relationships that are free from violence. Explain that as a class, we're going to create a chart. The chart will include what is a boundary, what are boundaries, examples of personal boundaries, and examples of boundaries being crossed. So the chart that they can use, however the teacher's going about it, or it's on chart paper or whiteboard or however. What is a boundary? A line, a limit, or a subject you are willing to talk about, or a limit of things you're willing to do. Important to note that what is acceptable as safe or personal space is different around the world. In some cultures, it's polite to always make eye contact when talking to someone. In other cultures, it's polite to not make eye contact when talking to someone older or in a position of authority. What's important is to let others know when they are crossing a personal boundary with you, and respect if someone else lets you know that you have crossed their comfort for personal boundaries. Each person will have different personal boundaries, which is perfectly okay. Everyone's boundaries are valid and need to be respected. Then examples of boundaries. I want to hear about your day. I'll be free to give you my full attention in 15 minutes. I'm not willing to argue with you. I'll hang out with you, but I will not gossip about other people. I really enjoy holding your hand while walking together, but I don't want to kiss you when we say goodbye. I like you, but I don't enjoy hugging people. Please stop asking for hugs. What are some examples of personal boundaries? Again, this is up for discussion with students, so that, engaging between teacher and student groups. Personal boundaries, physical contact. I don't like to hug people unless I know them well. Keeping your personal space. I don't like it when people I don't know touch me or get really close to me, or I prefer that someone asks to borrow my things before taking them. And as far as language, I prefer not to use cuss words when talking to people. Again, examples. What does it look like when boundaries have been crossed? So physical contact might look like someone I don't know well came up to me and hugged me. Keeping your personal space. Someone touches your arm to get your attention, or someone takes part of your lunch without asking. And then as far as language, someone starts using cuss words to talk about another person while you are hanging out with them. Brainstorm other examples of boundaries being crossed. Have students work in pairs, small groups, or whole class, whatever works with your group of students. Again, brainstorming. Some items to add to the list if students don't mention them. Sending unsolicited pics or pictures of someone's genitals. An adult family member or family friend expects a hug or a kiss, and you don't feel like hugging or kissing that person. Sexual assault, also known as rape. Sending DMs to people you don't know to tell them they are hot, or proposing to have sex. Catcalling, or grabbing someone's body parts while walking by. It's essential to honor someone's boundaries. And when in relationships with others, you need to talk about each person's boundaries. Before engaging in activities with a partner, there must be consent. So moving into consent. How consent works. In a healthy relationship, all partners are able to talk openly and agree upon what kind of activity they want to engage in, whether it's holding hands, kissing, touching, intercourse, or anything else. It's important for all partners in a relationship to feel comfortable with what's happening every time it happens. And then what is consent? And consent's an enthusiastic yes. I have a note to make sure to discuss the meaning of enthusiastic. And then a common misconception about consent is that talking about or getting consent will make a moment awkward or ruin the mood. From there, what does a respectful relationship look like? Talking openly and honestly about what you like and don't like, listening to each other. If in a sexual relationship, checking in with each other before, during, and after sexual activity, accepting that no means no and only yes means yes, respecting each other's boundaries no matter what, not sharing or threatening to share personal stuff, information, pictures, videos with others, respecting each other's right to privacy online and off. And then moving into the video, what makes a relationship healthy? And then setting and respecting boundaries activities. Scenarios for the activity are located at the end of the packet. Everybody has their own set of boundaries. It's each person's right to set those boundaries and for those boundaries to be respected. As you start to date, the issue of boundaries is going to come up around sex and sexuality, which can make them more sensitive, but still important to discuss. So instructions, the activity can be done with small groups or whole class, whichever works best for your class. This could also be a role play activity where students act out the scenarios. So passing out one activity sheet per small group, provide enough time for groups to respond to both scenarios, and then having students share what they thought about how each person in the scenario responded, along with how they could have responded differently. As students respond, write key words on the board to reinforce effective communication about boundaries. The following lists are suggestions if the group isn't providing much. Examples of effective communication: be clear, stop when someone says no, be direct, but try not to be mean about it. Some possible responses could be, please don't do that. This doesn't work for me. I'm drawing the line at, not at this time. I've decided not to. I don't want to do that. I'm not comfortable with this. I can't do that for you. This is not acceptable. Discussion questions. Think about what makes it more difficult to set boundaries. Thinking ahead about the situations lead to our boundaries getting crossed will help us prepare the next time we are put in a similar situation. So what messages are portrayed in the media about boundaries? For example, how do men respect or disrespect women's boundaries in the media? How do the messages you receive from the media influence how you or the people you know set or respect boundaries? What can be hard about setting boundaries? Does it matter if you are in public or around other people? How might that change your response? How do you think it felt for Julia to have her boundaries disrespected in the scenarios? What do you think it feels like when boundaries are respected and when they're disrespected? What to do? How to express your boundaries? Use confident body language, face the other person, make eye contact, use a steady tone of voice at an appropriate volume, not too quiet, not too loud. Be respectful, avoid yelling, using put downs, or giving the silent treatment. It's okay to be firm, but your message will be better received if you are respectful. Plan ahead. Think about what you want to say and how you'll say it before entering a difficult discussion. This can help you feel more confident about your position. And compromise. When appropriate, listen and consider the needs of the other person. You never have to compromise, but give and take is part of any healthy relationship. So, and then the closing activity, the relationship bill of rights. I found this and love this. You have rights in your relationship. Everyone does, and those rights can help you set boundaries that should be respected by both partners in a healthy relationship. You have the right to privacy, both online and off. You have the right to feel safe and respected. You have the right to decide who you want to date or not date. You have the right to say no at any time, to sex, to drugs or alcohol, to a relationship, even if you've said yes before. You have the right to hang out with your friends and family and do things you enjoy without your partner getting jealous or controlling. You have the right to end a relationship that isn't right or healthy for you. You have the right to live free from violence and abuse. And then the resources, similar to 8th grade again, and that whole taking a picture so they can have it for future access to share with friends that perhaps might need something. And then this was the activity. Obviously, it's at the end of the packet. So the first scenario was Sam and Chris are one of the first couples in 7th grade. Sam loves that everyone knows they're a couple and always holds Chris's hands in the hallway or puts their arm around Chris. Chris really likes Sam, but has never been a really physical person and doesn't like the public touching. The next time Sam sees Chris at school, they wrap their arm around Chris's waist, gives a gentle squeeze and says, "Hi." Chris, embarrassed, says, "You don't have to do that every time we see each other." Sam pulls back immediately, says, "Fine," and walks away. So then how do you think Sam handled the situation? What could have Sam done differently? How do you think Chris handled it? And what could have Chris done differently? And then the other scenario was Dominic and Julia spend a lot of time together now that they're a couple. When they find some private time alone, they like to kiss a lot. Dominic really wants to do something more, and so the next time they're alone together, he tries to pull Julia's shirt up and reach for one of her breasts. She pulls it back down and says no, but keeps kissing Dominic. He tries again, and she says, Dominic, no. Dominic remembers seeing in a movie that if you keep trying, sometimes the other person gives in. So he tries again. Julia pushes him off, stops kissing him, and says, I'm going home, and leaves. How do you think Dominic handled this? What could he have done differently? How do you think Julia handled this? And what could Julia have done differently? Uh-oh. Stop sharing. Okay.
All right, thank you. I'd like to start the discussion just by saying thank you, Rochelle. This was a beautiful, beautiful lesson. And I've got a 6th grader and a 7th grader at home right now. And I'm like, we're having this conversation constantly. And I look forward to talking about some of these scenarios with them in our own home, regardless of what happens tonight here with this committee. Okay, so was there any other discussion around this lesson?
I have,
Yes.
oh, sorry, go ahead, Rabbi.
We're going to do the rabbi, then Sarah, and then Manny.
So something I noticed is that there's discussion of abuse, but it seems to relate mostly or exclusively to physical abuse.
Okay.
And I think that having some mention of verbal and emotional abuse would be helpful, especially when we're talking about pressuring people into things they want, which can be verbal just as much as it could be an actual like physical assault.
Okay.
Rabbi, do you have an idea, like a specific, would you want to add specific verbiage to one of the scenarios, or are you thinking more broadly?
I mean, like on one page it said a relationship free from violence. I mean, it might be just maybe be cured by in the where there's sort of examples, if these are not mentioned, just putting in a couple of things that show the way it works. An example of some sort of verbal coercion, or unfortunately there's no shortage of examples of those sorts of things, but the students would be able to see how that fits into the thing and have some kind of context for it.
So can I just ask a clarifying real quick and jump in? So Rabbi, are you thinking too in the Bill of Rights to make sure when I'm talking, or when it's discussing violence and abuse, that perhaps there's also an addition of that could be verbal, emotional. It's not just a physical or physical,
I think,
emotional. Okay.
Yeah, I think that would probably work well.
Okay.
Excellent. That kind of pinpoints it for us. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. Sarah, and then Manny.
Okay, yeah. Rochelle, thank you. I really, really like this lesson as well. And, as a communication person at UNR, I'm excited about this stuff because I think you really nailed it. There was something that it might not have been missing. I might just have missed it, but there is something that I didn't hear, and I think is kind of crucial for this age group. I'm around in maybe slide 10 or 11, or maybe page 10 or 11. I'm not sure, but it's where you're listing things that not the Bill of Rights, it's earlier than that, but things that I don't want to hear people cuss. I don't like to cuss when these, in that section of it. And I didn't hear anything about not wanting people to talk about my own or other people's bodies. And I think that's kind of crucial for this age group, getting together and talking about who's got the bigger boobs or who's got the smaller waist or the longer legs or the whatever, right? Yeah. And I would love to see, I would vote for this lesson now as it is, but I would, if that could be an example that was pointed to something
that's a great
in that list, if it doesn't come up, because I think that's kind of important.
Okay. That's a great idea.
So specifically, you're talking about, I don't like it when people, use curse words around me, and I don't like it when people talk about my body.
or other people's
Can you
bodies. I mean,
clarify
I
what
think that's
section
part
that-
of sexual abuse too, is, or hostile environments, is that if I'm sitting there listening to a lot of people talk about somebody else's body and whether it's attractive or unattractive or normal or not normal, I think that's uncomfortable, and it's okay to say, I don't like that.
Can you clarify, Rochelle,
clarify
what
that?
section that is? I was trying to find it, but.
Are we going over examples of boundaries? That's what you're
That's where it
discussing,
was.
Sarah?
In boundaries, yes.
And when it has like the language piece, I prefer not to use cuss words when talking to people, and then boundaries being crossed. Someone starts using cuss words when they talk. So would it be under those perhaps? Not liking,
That's
I
where I
prefer
made
not
the
to-
note of it. When you were
I
talking
prefer
about
not
those
to-
things.
okay, prefer not to talk about others' bodies or, okay.
Thank you for bringing your expertise into that, Sarah, and for pinpointing what you're looking for. Okay, Manny?
Yeah, so as I was going through looking, I realized one big issue that we never address is to respond when these are actually asked about like what they look like example they look like. When
You're
somebody's
breaking up,
trying,
Manny.
they actually like, oh gosh. Can you guys hear me?
No.
Okay, give me a second. Let me see, get this
Okay.
wrapped a little bit better.
I have a couple things to add if you want to, Ashley.
Okay, yeah, we can do Andrea and then come back to Manny.
Hi, Andrea Thompson. Lovely lesson, Rochelle. I have just a couple things when I was going over it that I thought would be interesting to add perhaps. So on page 9, when there's some things to mention, if the students don't bring it up, I thought it might be helpful to also mention sharing others' personal information they've confided in you. So that could be something that I think is important, because there can be a lot of like they're confiding in each other at this age, and to share that with others would certainly be a violation of a boundary. I really love under the activities about the boundaries, there's a lot of ambiguity with gender, which I think is great. You know, the types of names that are used, using they as pronouns, which is great. I do think maybe on page 13, there's like a media message. I think we could potentially make that a little less gender specific. Let me pull it back up. I'm trying to toggle between screens here. Let's see here. I put it on page.
How men respect or disrespect women's boundaries in the media?
Yeah, you know, how could we make that? I mean, I think I
More
understand
gender neutral?
because there is certainly a stigma surrounding that, but I thought perhaps, sorry, my toddler's in the background. Okay, I can, the things that, something like how we can, you know, what messages are portrayed in the media, for example, how do men disrespect women or boundaries, or we could even put then on the end, or vice versa, or how, you know, I think we could maybe do a better job of making, like expanding that just a little bit to make it less gender specific.
Okay.
What if you said, how do men, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
try not to, how do men and women respect or disrespect each other's boundaries?
Yeah, I think that's perfect, because that opens the conversation to, rather than just focusing on how, you know, men may disrespect women in the media, but how do, you know, someone who identifies as male disrespects another male or something like that. It kind of can open the conversation.
Okay.
Overall, I think it was really great. I would also, of course, I'm always an advocate under the resources page to put your primary care provider or your,
Sorry.
you don't leave me out, Rochelle.
No.
Yeah, but other than that, those 3 things would be the only things that I would potentially add. And I think they're small changes that just make a big difference in already really great information that our young people need. So
Okay.
well done, Rochelle.
Thank you for that. Let's give Manny another try, and then Kelly.
Yes. Can you guys hear me and I'm not breaking up now?
Mm-mm.
Awesome. Okay. Real quick to add on to that, Andrea, what if we said something like, how are boundaries disrespected in the media? Because then you're talking about all boundaries in general. Would that be something, Andrea?
I like making it more vague, but I also kind of like that, you know, I want to make it more gender open, but I also think it is important to talk about gender, right? So I really like what Kelly has said about, you know, and maybe she'll have to repeat it so I can like write it down. But I like that we can open the conversation of basically how genders treat each other in the media. I mean, I think that's, you know, going to be a topic that they'll probably want to talk about, especially given some of the feedback we've gotten via email this past week.
Okay. Okay, so what I was originally trying to say was, I think we probably need to add a slide or something to discuss what to do when your boundaries have been crossed, like how to respond to that. Because I don't really see anything in there that actually like gives them like the tools to respond to somebody, you know, disrespecting or breaking those boundaries, especially after you've already set them.
So I read this lesson to how that part was in the class discussion where they looked at a scenario and then, but the teacher's not feeding them the answers. They're asking what could, you know, each party have done differently.
Did I miss that part then? Because
I don't know what pages anything are on.
Oh, is it in the examples?
In the examples, yes, thank you.
Julia and them.
Thank you, Tanya, yeah.
Page 15.
Okay.
I definitely understand. I mean, you know, I respect your expertise, and if you think we need to provide the teacher a list of here's some possible healthy responses.
I think we should, because as much as I would love for our kids to be able to think of those on their own, because I think it also is important to give them some examples to use, because I mean, just trying to think about it in the moment, you might not know how to really respond to it. And the only thing that you might be able to resort back to is, oh yeah, and Cher, they told me that I can say this. And so that way they at least have something rather than kind of freeze in the moment.
So Manny, are you thinking of a slide with some of the examples of what that could look like, perhaps? So they're actually seeing it up in front of them instead of a discussion point that.
Yeah, I think that would be more it would be beneficial, like maybe after slide, let's see, maybe slide 11. Yeah, after slide 11, because that's after we brainstorm other examples of boundaries being crossed. Then maybe we provide a slide that says, here are some examples of things you can do if your boundaries are crossed. And then we add, what are other things that you can do? So that this way it still allows them to brainstorm, but we do provide them one or two examples so they have something to fall back on.
And maybe something, if I may also just hop along, something on the serious note, because we are mentioning sexual assault, also known as rape, as being one of the boundary crossings. So the boundary, like the solution to if someone does cross your boundary can range from, if it's something small, obviously, to something as large as sexual assault, having some sort of resource for that. So I think the idea of a slide is a good idea, because that way it makes it serious enough and we provide them with those resources.
Yeah, exactly, Tanya. And that was kind of what I was thinking on there, because I mean, if like with some of these things, I feel like just due to like how the media sometimes portrays things and some of the stigma that is around it, especially depending on what culture you may be looking at or coming from, I don't think some of our kids will know how to respond to it. So I'd like for them to be able to have something to fall back on at the bare minimum.
Like a little toolbox. So
yes,
when we're talking about this, let me, just so I understand, if I'm looking at like the activity part, the bottom of page 12, top of page 13 too, yes, like examples of effective communication, some possible responses, that putting that piece into an actual slide, correct?
I didn't know if that was what Manny was talking about, but as he was talking, I was thinking of those pages, and I was thinking I maybe didn't realize they weren't in a slide, because I really liked that, because it says, please don't do that. This doesn't work for me. I'm drawing the line at, I mean, I just thought those were excellent phrases. So okay, I personally think those phrases could very easily be in a slide. Okay. Sorry, Kelly Roper.
Yeah. Oh, no. So kind of on the lines of what Kelly was saying, but it's more like what happens though, like what can they do if you say please don't do that, but then they still go ahead and do that? Like what do they do then? Because that's when you have that trauma, kind of that shock that's going to fall in place. And I want to make sure that they know what they can do should that boundary be crossed, even after you've already said it. I want to make sure that they know how to respond to it, I guess.
I think that's so important. And I also am remembering the trafficking training that's coming into some of our schools, and that if we crossed into some of that content, they might possibly not be able to do those trainings for the students, because like if you opt no to share, and so I'm wondering from Rochelle, and I don't know who else might know, Kendra or Sarah, is that part of that trafficking training, and we should avoid that specific conversation here in 7th grade, or are we good to go? Because I think it was about a year ago that we couldn't bring that stuff into the conversation.
I think I'm just gonna, unless Sarah has something else to say. I was to say, I think we decided we opted to leave that out of the lessons, the sex trafficking, because it was wasn't at the end of last year we had this discussion for 8th grade, leaving that out so students that perhaps didn't have share permission would not be missing that information, as far as whole school,
Right.
things that are going on.
Right.
So,
but we have to be careful, I think, if I can pipe in here, because this is my only one comment too.
Please.
On page 9, we're in that discussion where top of the page, and you're saying, here's some things to add to the list if the students don't mention them. And these are pretty serious things, right? So sending pictures of genitals, sexual assault, right? We're adding that to the conversation, but then in terms of the tools on page 13, because that's how I interpret it too, that these were the tools, we're saying, use confident body language, be respectful, plan ahead, compromise. Not if you're in a situation where you're being sexually assaulted or hurt. So we just have to be careful, because kind of Manny's saying that at that moment when something really serious is happening, that's traumatic, and it doesn't matter if they're respectful at that point. I just feel like there's some conflicting things. If we're going to go there and we're going to bring this into it and say sexual assault is the crossing of the boundary, then I feel like we have to do it. So maybe this just isn't a lesson where we talk about sexual assault. Because I think that's a really good point, Ashley, about the trafficking classes. But that was the only, I like this whole lesson too, and that was just the only thing I'm like, oh, we're introducing assault as a boundary crossing, and then we're telling them, you can use these sentences, or you can, but when you express your boundaries, to be respectful and to compromise, and so I don't know what the answer to that is, but that was just a concern that I had when I was reading it. But otherwise, I totally like this lesson.
Thank you for that, adding that. I bet if there's someone, it would be Sarah. Do you have something to say about that? I do see you there, Kelly.
That was, well, okay, I'm Sarah, and I have a question, so I'm going to answer to that. Not the Sarah you were aiming for. But that is my question, is for our legal counsel, is a slide pointing them to resources if their boundaries are violated or crossed. Is that really a violation or a crossover into the sexual trafficking, into the sex trafficking curriculum? It doesn't seem like it to me, but I guess we need some clarification on it.
Okay.
This is Sarah Montalvo. I thought you were talking to the Sarah.
I was.
Okay.
Yes.
And I can't speak to the actual curriculum. That's actually more of a comment for Rochelle in the terms of planning. It's not really a legal question. It's more of a curriculum question. So I'll defer to Rochelle on that.
Okay, thank you.
So Sarah, just for clarification, when you're thinking of this, Because you're not discussing a whole lesson on sex trafficking per se. You're talking about resources where we could send kids. Is that what you're thinking?
I mean, I've been trying to follow this conversation and we ping pong a little bit. And when we're on Zoom, it's even crazier. But my impression, and which is okay, but my impression is that what we're asking to do or recommending or concerned that we're not doing is that we're not addressing that there's an additional resource or there's an additional step that students can take if the boundary crossing becomes egregious to the point of sexual assault or abuse. That we've given these sort of communication-based strategies of be strong, stand up straight, say no, those kinds of things. But sometimes those don't work. And then our boundaries are crossed and violated. And then where are we? And my impression of where this discussion was, please correct me if I'm wrong, was that the idea was to add a slide allowing students, pointing to some resources or some strategies of what happens if it gets that bad. Am I wrong about that or am I right about that?
I think that is right. I have a thought on all of this, and that is to change the point of, I think, Manny, you were saying, maybe possibly around slide 12, but what if instead the Relationship Bill of Rights is on slide 20, and then adding, and then 21 is resources, which includes everywhere, that you could go if in that range of my boundaries have been crossed. And so really, we really just need, I feel like we just need to be saying either as a slide or as a point to the teacher, you always have the right to talk to someone and tell people about your experiences when your boundaries have been crossed. And then there's all those resources, and some of them are specifically for victims of assault and those kinds of things. And we're going to add, I imagine we'll add your, primary care physician or provider. So I think that's just a natural place to put it, that there are things that you can do, but to get into a full discussion of if you've been assaulted, don't take a shower, tell your parents. If it was someone in your family, call someone else. And so, like that becomes a very large thing that I think is possibly outside the scope of this lesson. Tanya?
I was just going to say about the slide about the resources. On a lot of them, and it's missing here, it seems like it's also, trusted adult, like Andrea was saying, healthcare provider, like the list of people that students would actually know, because if you're in 7th grade and something happens, you might not call a 1-800 number. I mean, it's great that it's there and maybe they will, but maybe the first step would be for them to think about, is there someone at school I could talk to, or a family member, or, like maybe adding some of those more close people that might feel safer or more comfortable, just adding that to the resources. And it's already the slide has many resources. I'm worried that the font's going to get so small that if they take a picture, they're not going to be able to see it. So I don't know if it's worth having 2 different types of slides or anything, but just kind of adding some of the more familiar type of people to the resources.
I agree with that. And can you, Kelly, I do see you. Do you have people for our list or?
No, I do have a thought about the resources, about other thoughts though, because I agree with Tanya. And it goes with Andrea's comment too about her general practitioner, but I almost am thinking that you could have the general resource, and then the final slide could be something tied to the word compromise on page 13. It's like when it's appropriate, maybe we put something in there that says sexual assault is never something that needs compromising conversation on. And then like in the resource, you might highlight this slide being like super serious boundary crossing, like I know that sounds really silly, but you highlight, there's one slide that's the normal resources people could go to, right? If you need resources because something extremely serious has happened, this is something where and that's why you have take a pic, because it's got the phone numbers and the places to text. So maybe you say resources, but then also draw their attention to the fact that this page where the resources is for serious things too. I mean, not that you can't take serious things to your practitioner or a parent or something like that, but maybe you need that anonymity, or, you know, I don't know.
Okay. Thank you. Sarah Kaiser.
So I'm wondering if we're splitting hairs just yes, Kelly, I agree with everything that you just said. So this is not a reaction to you, but I wonder if we're getting a little bit too splitting hairs a little bit too much. And I'm wondering if the simple message after this boundary crossing thing, it could be this, you compromise, you do this, is a very simple slide that says, if you are in physical danger or you feel psychologically threatened, talk to an adult, a trusted adult. Just keep it really simple in that moment. I just wonder if that might be a stronger message for our kids than pointing to, because we do have those resources at the end, than pointing to exactly who that needs to be. I don't know. Thoughts?
I like that. Rabbi?
Oh.
And then Andrew.
I agree with the last couple of thoughts. Something that I've in looking at this, I'm noticing is that it is all from or almost entirely from the standpoint of, I don't want to say from the standpoint of the victim, but it's saying, you have the right to draw this boundary. You can do this. It doesn't say, don't rape. And while that seems like maybe that sounds sort of absurd, I think it needs to be said from that other point of view that, like, there are certain behaviors that when they are met with resistance, they become crimes. Hand to genital contact is a crime. And there was that example where the guy who keeps trying to put his hand up the young lady's shirt. That's sort of the only instance that sort of focuses on that. I think calling that out and saying, that from that point of view would dovetail or lead very well into when this is done, when this boundary is crossed, that is a crime, or that can be a crime and should be reported to authorities. Because I think that would sort of lay it out there in a different way that would sort of more make it clear, like, this is not acceptable behavior, rather than just when the unacceptable behavior happens, here's how you can advocate for yourself.
That's an excellent point.
Can I add on really quick to what Rabbi Ben said?
Do you mind, Andrea? Okay. Yeah, go for it, man. Okay,
so first off, I agree with you, Rabbi, that I think we should kind of make sure that we point that out and clarify that. But that, I guess the whole point of what I was trying to bring up was, I want to try to give them the resources or the tools to avoid becoming a victim, rather than, oh, you've been raped, here are people that you can talk to. Oh, you've been assaulted or you've been verbally abused, here are people you can talk to. I want us to maybe come up with something that could, if this is happening in the moment, here's how you can avoid becoming a victim, without maybe necessarily saying those words, because I'd rather somebody tell me about something that was really scary and how they were able to get away from it than tell me about, oh, guess what happened to me last night, and me going, oh God, this is horrible. Like, does that make sense? That was the point I was trying to make with that slide. Like, I want to prevent getting victims, not talking to a victim after the fact.
Yeah, and I really, I hear that, and I'm really agree with the rabbi that the best way to prevent them from being victims is to not have people assaulting other people. The aggressor is the problem.
Agreed.
Right. I mean, right. We're all on the same page as we don't want any victims. Andrea?
I agree. I wonder if we added to that Bill of Rights at the bottom, like, you have a responsibility to respect others' boundaries, would be a good way to potentially put that in there. And perhaps there could be a couple of other pieces that we could add to that, Rabbi, that, like, you have a responsibility, to control your own actions, or, in some way to kind of put that. And, and I think that would accomplish what you're hoping to accomplish, Manny, without, making it feel like we have to avoid being a victim. So I think that you're both on the right page. And so I would say potentially to like sum it up, maybe we could put a slide in between 20 and 21. I can't remember. I think it was Ashley who was mentioning that, to potentially just say something like, how to respond to cross boundaries. You can speak with a trusted adult. You can use the terms we've already given you previously, talk to your primary care provider, as just a segue into the additional resources, something that would say this could vary for who you reach out to, but that would could potentially be a good place to put it. But I think to address what, Rabbi, what you are saying is to maybe add to that Bill of Rights some accountability for folks, like you have a responsibility to respect other people's boundaries or to control your own actions. Could be a way to address that and get, what we're hoping to get out of it. So.
Kelly?
Okay, Kelly Roper for the record. I agree. And I think one of the things, and this is when I thought this was what Manny was saying, but it wasn't. I really think that page 12 and 13 should be a slide in and of itself when it says those simple phrases. Please don't do this. This doesn't work for me, because I think that's empowering to be like, oh, yeah. Especially because, and I wrote notes from the video, the one part of the video that jumped out at me as a parent, or just if I were a teacher, that was just so mind-blowing, was the idea that one of those kids said that there were things that she wouldn't say to someone's face but would text them. And just the idea that that has no tone, no point of reference for the receiver. And also in the day and age of social media, like, can be screenshotted or given to somebody else to read. And so I just thought that was, and then they also said that sometimes they'll either flat out say something or just ghost someone. So I think that given somewhat poor stunted communication skills, like giving them like 10 direct phrases where it's like, hey, guess what, kids, this is good to say. This is okay to say. This is nice. Say it like this and it's fine. I really liked that. And then I don't know, Rochelle, if you put it in for me, and maybe some of you guys might remember, in 8th grade or high school, but I think it's really important to note that sometimes we don't even know we have a boundary until it's been crossed. And so not necessarily like I think we need to teach them how to deal with it when that happens, but just like you're talking about boundaries, what do boundaries look like? And then just identifying, you might not even realize that you have a certain boundary until somebody has crossed it. And it's okay, that can become a boundary and you can verbalize it and say, no, that's not okay with me. But other than that, so I'd like to see if we could add that somewhere. But other than that, I really liked it a lot. I thought it was a sensational lesson.
Thank you for that, Manny.
So kind of thinking about what you said, Rabbi Benjamin, first off, also, Kelly, I do agree with you on that. I think we should give them some of those things. I was thinking maybe something along the lines of this at the very end, after we show, or before we show the resource list. You must also respect the boundaries that have been set for you. Failure to do so could be considered abuse, harassment, or assault. Abuse, harassment, and assault are all punishable by law. So that this way they understand that whether you setting that boundary or somebody else setting that boundary, it is something that has to be respected. Does that work for you, Rabbi? Something kind of like that?
Yeah, I think that I mean that makes it plain and clear. I hate to say it, but I feel like part of this is kind of putting the fear of the law into people, because there is such a culture of being able to push and being so resistant to hearing people putting up their own boundaries.
Okay. And then the other thing, I mean, it was just a very simple side note, but on slide 16, we had a few things that were highlighted in blue to kind of emphasize they're important. I think we probably want to highlight them in a different color just so they can really be emphasized, because just looking at this, that blue kind of with that black background, it kind of almost shades away from it. So I was thinking maybe put it in like highlighter yellow or highlighter green so it can actually stand out. That were the words no matter what, threatening to share, and then the pictures and videos portion of it, those words just make them really kind of stand out more.
All right, so I've been kind of keeping a list here in Word. I have high hopes to get to the rest of the grades the rest of this year. So I have high hopes of moving tonight. So here's my list, and I can't see you nodding or whatever, so you'll have to just wait until I'm done, please, and then you can let me know. Where it talked about abuse is violence, we want to say verbal, physical, and emotional. Where they discuss, we don't like curse, saying things like, I don't like it when people cuss around me, to say also, I don't like when people talk about my body or someone else's body. We want to add on to, I don't know if it was page 9 or slide 9, sharing the personal information that others have confided in you is also not okay. On 13, we wanted the media messaging, talking about how do men and women respect and disrespect each other in the media. Probably those other things on page 13 need to be a slide of their own as phrases that students can use or children can use, your tools for you to put into your toolbox to set your own boundaries. After slide 11, add one that says, well, I don't know if we decided on that or not. We'll have to discuss. Here are some examples of things that you can do if your boundaries are crossed, but really maybe what we're saying is for sure between slides 20 and 21, add a new one saying we all have the responsibility to respect boundaries. You have the responsibility to respect others' boundaries, and if you do not, in some instances, you're breaking the law. If your boundaries have been crossed, you can tell a trusted adult at home, your school nurse, your teacher, or your primary care provider. Okay. That was the list that I had been keeping, and I just need some clarification from you all, or maybe we just want to let it drop actually, I would rather just let it drop, but here are some examples of things you can do if your boundaries are crossed. I think you need to tell an adult. Sarah Kaiser.
I'm not speaking to that piece, but there is a piece of a clarification that I would like to, and that is that how strongly do we feel about telling Rochelle exactly where these things should go back into the curriculum? Because you were very precise on between 20 and 21 and between 13 and 14, and I don't want us to give instruction that is too precise and then doesn't make the curriculum work when she actually puts it all together. So that's my only question about whether we want to specify exactly where these things have to happen.
I'm okay leaving it up to Rochelle, so long as the content is in there. Okay.
I trust Rochelle to make the proper changes for all of us. She's done a great job since. So
I do too. Kelly?
Sure. There was one thing I forgot to mention. I was wondering if with the videos, we could stop them at 2 minutes and 6 seconds and 4 minutes and 43 seconds, so that it's not just airtime with the website advertisements, is a thought. And then I thought your list was perfect. I trust Rochelle too. I was wondering if we could put something in there acknowledging people not knowing they might not know there is a boundary until it's crossed. But your list matched my list too, except for that one last part.
Okay. Rochelle, what do you, if we don't give you exact phrasing for that, is something you feel comfortable putting in, or would?
Oh, yeah, you mean especially for Kelly's last point about not knowing, yeah, and finding where it would be most appropriate, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so Sarah Montalvo, do I need to list those things out in a motion?
Yes, that would be a good idea for the record.
Okay, I'm just gonna go for it here.
Go, Ashley.
Excellent. I hear banging happening in the room next door. Okay. So for the record, my name is Ashley Wade, and I would make the motion. Oh, I have to pull up my packet. Sorry. 2.02, right? I would make the motion that the shared advisor.
Comment. Are we supposed to ask for public comment?
Oh, is there public comment? Thank you. Good thing someone's paying attention.
Thank you, Kelly.
Hi, so we've received 2 public comments. The first one from Lee Newman, and the second one from Kathy Simon Holland. And that is all.
Thank you, Luis.
Luis, was that the general public comment, or was that public comment to this specific agenda item?
General.
Oh, okay. Let's wait for those for general.
Okay. They were important. I was glad to have them though. Okay. So no public comment on this item currently. My name is Ashley Wade. And so on item 2.02, I would make the motion that we, the Share Advisory Committee, recommend to the Board of Trustees they adopt the lesson for the 7th grade curriculum, healthy relationships and the 2 accompanying videos. However, we would also make the recommendation of the following changes. Abuse be defined in addition to violence, verbal, physical, and emotional. When students set boundaries such as, I don't like it when people use curse words around me, to also add, I don't like when people talk about my body or someone else's body. And things that cross boundaries would be to sharing personal information that someone has confided in you, to amend the media discussion question to read, how do men and women respect or disrespect each other in the media? To take the points, the teacher's points for possible tools for students to use when setting boundaries and make that into its own slide for students to see explicitly. To add a slide, and to add 1 or possibly more slides as Rochelle sees fit, to say we all have the responsibility to respect boundaries. If you have crossed someone's boundaries, oh shoot, I forget what I said earlier, I loved it. You've possibly broken the law, and that's something to keep in mind. And if someone has crossed your boundaries, you can tell a trusted adult at any time, a trusted adult at home, a school nurse, your teacher, or your primary care provider. That's my long-winded motion, and I'm looking for a second.
I
Oh, you'll go first, Sarah.
Okay, I sarcased your second, sorry.
Okay, thank you. I saw his hand going.
Could I ask for one friendly amendment?
ask.
To at the very end, when you say school nurse, also just to add a school counselor in there.
Yes, I accept that.
I accept that.
Thank you.
Yay, thank you.
And Kelly?
Only because you are being so specific on your list, I would like to ask for a friendly amendment that verbalizes your boundaries might be crossed when you don't realize it's a boundary. And then, well,
Yes.
you know how I said it previously, Rochelle, however you
Yes.
choose to say
Sometimes you
it.
don't know you've had a boundary crossed.
You
or
don't know you have a boundary
boundary
until it's been crossed,
until it's been
possibly.
crossed. Thank you. I accept that.
I accept that.
Thank you. Okay, any in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Thank you, Lydia. Any opposed? Okay, and the motion passes unanimously. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. If you do not need breaks, I would like to get the next item, which is the reviewing the revisions from previous our previous meeting, and then we'll take a break. Okay, so moving on to item 2.03.
You ready for me to share my screen?
I am. Discussion of revisions recommended in our October 12th meeting.
Okay. There we go. And I'm just scrolling. I do believe you'll notice the slides are even bigger when I went to copy them onto the the lesson from the original slide. One of the things we talked about was getting rid of, I think it said the average 28-day menstrual cycle, and we wanted to get rid of the 28-day. So I did that. And we also wanted to include another slide to talk about it's quite common to be irregular for the first few years of menstruation. Periods can be affected by stress, diet, exercise, etc. I believe we also wanted to make sure that we included on this slide right here, can occur anywhere from 21 to 35 days. Do not hesitate to ask if you're concerned or have questions about your menstrual cycle. Talk to a trusted adult, talk to your healthcare provider. What to expect when you talk, and I hope I'm capturing this as you wanted it, Andrea, too, because I know you were specific. Want to expect what to expect when you talk to your healthcare provider. You do not have to have a physical exam, pap smear, or vaginal exam, because you had mentioned that a lot of times individuals come in afraid of that when they have concerns. So they won't talk about their concerns because they're afraid that's going to happen. And then moving down into this activity, we wanted to make sure we notated important to explain to students you can become pregnant before you've had your first period because you ovulate before you menstruate. And then we wanted to make, it's going a little fast. We wanted to make sure we added a piece about contraception. And so I really went back to 8th grade and pulled from that because it never hurts, right, to see things twice and as far as this. But then also wanted to make sure that before we move on to the activity, we need to go over some types of contraception and what it means to be used consistently and correctly. So, and then, a brief discussion of the types of contraceptives that are up here, and then what consistently and correctly means. Used every time without fail, used as directed. Yes, read the directions on the package. If you have questions, talk to your healthcare provider or a trusted adult. And then the reproduction basics, 28-day cycle activity with the cards. I'm trying to think. And then remember, no matter how you identify, it's important for everyone to understand how the biological female's reproductive system works, to understand what's normal, and in some cases, when to see a healthcare provider. And I think, did I cover all of our edits or did I miss something that? And then this was onto the activity. Did I cover all of our edits or did I skip over something?
I feel like it looks good to me.
It looks good to me too, Kelly Roper, for the record. I am curious on your slide for types of contraception. So you pulled it just from 8th grade, which makes me. So dual use, I know this is going to sound really stupid because I don't remember the 8th grade lesson in regards to, is dual use defined? Is that something that people will clearly know what dual use actually means?
So something that we'll have to make sure that we point out to what our students.
Three times. So I just want to make sure they are like, oh, okay, well, what's that?
not using a condom twice. Is that what you're getting at, Kelly? Like, that's because we know I've had that discussion with kids. So,
Okay.
it's so important to note that we make sure that dual use is explained.
Well,
And I
okay,
mean, I
so-
hope you were okay when I was like, I'm just going to pull this because it was a simple layout from 8th grade. And I thought, okay, these are some things that some of our kids have probably heard of, especially if they have older siblings. But we also wanted to make sure, I think on this one too, that we discussed emergency contraception, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
Okay, so you're really funny. The fact that what you just said for dual use, this I think makes my point, because it wasn't in my head what I was necessarily thinking, because I was thinking, since it's on the slide that says types of contraception, I was thinking dual use is, well, in my, like, I'm looking at external condoms and internal condoms, like
Oh, that'd be
using
great.
more than one contraceptive.
Frank's taught your own.
So, but the idea of don't use the condom twice.
Sorry.
That too, clearly. But that would be on a don't. So.
Sorry, Kelly. I just.
Okay. I'm scrolling to see.
I
Mhm.
really like the fact that you said yes, read the directions, because yeah, that just makes me smile.
Right.
Okay, Rabbi?
Is there at some point in here a discussion of the relative efficacy of the types of contraception? Because we have the statement that the only thing that is 100% effective is abstinence, and then all the other things together. And there is a very, very wide gulf between, say, for example, condoms and withdrawal. I mean, withdrawal has a success rate of maybe 75% or so, 78 at max. I'm gonna just say this, that I'm betting that rate is much worse amongst middle school and high school boys, just knowing a thing or two about being a young man. So I think it would be important to stress that not all contraception is created equal.
Okay.
We did discuss that in 8th grade.
Yeah, we did.
In depth in 8th grade. Mm-hmm. So they'll be coming into it soon. Okay, thank you for bringing that up. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. Sarah Kaiser?
So just coming back to this, is this something that we can vote on this lesson and send it forward with the instruction to Rochelle that she can add that to the teacher's notes to kind of address this confusion that might happen on this slide? Are we all comfortable with that?
Yes, absolutely. You want to make a motion for that for us?
Sure. Okay. So what's this lesson called?
If I may
Do we
jump
have to,
in, let's just
is there
make sure
comment or
there's
anything
no
we have to do
public
first?
comment.
Luis,
Sorry,
is
Sarah.
there? Yeah. Is there
there
a public comment, Luis? Sorry to talk over you, Sarah.
No public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I can make this motion. Remind me what this lesson is called.
I have to look it up every time.
Rochelle, do you know?
It's reproductive. Oh, no.
Sorry.
Hold on.
Reproduction and
Is the
sexual
lesson
health.
reproductive and sexual health?
7th grade.
Sexual health.
7th grade, reproduction and sexual health.
Okay. Are you guys ready?
Make it happen, Sarah.
I, Sarah Kaiser, move that the Share Advisory Committee forwards the recommended adoption of the proposed curriculum, 7th grade curriculum, reproduction and sexual health, to the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees on the provision that Rochelle adds some instructional information for the teachers about clarifying the contraceptives, the efficacy of contraceptives, and what dual use means.
Okay.
I, Kelly Roper, second that motion.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay. Further, yep, we're good. Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
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 And any opposed? So on motion from Sarah Linda Kaiser and seconded by Kelly Roper, the motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you, everyone. Are we in need of a break before we move on to the? Yes, I'm seeing.
I don't.
Okay.
You want to move on, but somebody else needs one.
I am seeing some requests for that. So we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're going to take a 5-minute break and we'll meet back at 6:52. Please mute yourself and turn off your microphone.
What up, Rochelle? I'm back.
All right.
Are we ready? Almost?
Almost. Let's just give one more minute.
Yeah.
I want to say I just really appreciate working with you all so much.
Me too.
Me too.
Yeah.
Same.
That's a nice group.
Love the fact that we can disagree on stuff and still be cordial about it.
I like that too.
And I love
You're
that we
awesome.
get top-notch materials to deal with from Rochelle. It makes it so easy.
Yes, absolutely.
I was telling her before the meeting started, I said, like, she did a great job on high school. We did a great job on 8th grade, but it's like you're just, your slides and your lessons and the way they go, they just keep getting like better and better.
Yeah.
I think.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to when we do elementary. I will say that much. I will.
Well,
Looking forward to that.
our hope
Manny, are
is
you middle school or are you elementary?
Elementary. That's why I'm looking forward to it.
All right, we are here. Welcome back, everyone. We probably have our other folks here too. So we are moving on to item 2.04, presentation and discussion of, let's see, the definition of abstinence. Is that what we're looking at?
Mhm. Ready?
Yeah, we are ready. Thank you.
Okay. Since it has been brought up a few times at our meetings, and I know when we first adopted this definition, which Kelly was way back on the first year, I think, that I was in this position, time to readdress it, as it has been brought up a few times. So this is our current Washoe County School District definition of abstinence that was constructed by the committee 3 years ago, I want to say. So that being said, sexual abstinence is defined as refraining from all forms of sexual activity and genital contact, such as vaginal, oral, and anal sex. An abstinent person is someone who has either never had sex or someone who has had sex, but who has decided not to continue having sex for a period of time. And abstinence is the only 100% effective way to prevent sexually transmitted HIV, other sexually transmitted diseases or infections, and pregnancy. And then the definition of sex for this definition of abstinence was when a person's genitals touch another person's genitals, mouth, or anus.
Thank you, Rochelle.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had, Tanya, girl, it's you.
Well, I think this is all because I keep bringing up the same point every time we see a slide with this. And so I guess I don't know if you guys mind if I share my screen where I go through my logic of what I'm talking about. Is that okay?
That's fine with me.
That is fine with me, I think.
Is that legal?
Are these extra notes?
Oh,
I worry that that's supporting materials that we did not provide. So I don't think that we should be using them as notes for the whole committee since they weren't attached with the agenda.
Okay, then I will only use them for myself. So actually, Rochelle, do you mind putting your slide back up then, just so we have it for reference?
Yeah.
So the thing that I keep running into is not necessarily the definition of abstinence, but specifically that third bullet point. And this is just kind of me putting words together and thinking of the logic of it. Like on the third point, abstinence is the only 100% effective way to prevent, and then disregard the other stuff, but then we also say pregnancy. So one of the things that we're saying there is abstinence is the only 100% effective way to prevent pregnancy. But we're saying that abstinence includes abstaining from, for example, oral sex. And so I feel like we are being misleading logically. If you plug in one definition into the other thing, we're kind of saying that you can get pregnant by oral and anal sex. And so I feel like we should take that third bullet point and separate it out to 2 bullet points. The first one so one being about the non-pregnancy stuff and one being about the pregnancy stuff. So my suggestion is that the third bullet point would instead become: abstinence is the only 100% effective way to prevent sexually transmitted HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases or infections. And then a new bullet point: abstinence from vaginal sex is the only 100% effective way to prevent pregnancy. So separating it out so that the pregnancy part only has to do with vaginal sex, not with the other pieces. Because I feel like if you're a 7th grader or something and you're looking at these things and maybe you don't know exactly, you might get the idea that, and not that I'm saying that 7th graders should be having any kind of oral or anal sex either, but they should at least know the facts. So that's where I'm coming from.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for explaining your thought process on that. Kelly?
Okay, so I have a question for Andrea. And I know that I talked to a friend of mine that's a nurse up at the university previously when I first joined the committee, and the topic of anal sex came up, and she said that that's way more common because people feel like, even amongst heterosexual couples, because they feel like it prevents pregnancy. But I am a little bit leery of saying that because can't you still get pregnant? Would you say you could still get pregnant from unprotected anal sex if there were semen in the vicinity of, it would have to be the perfect storm, but couldn't you still get pregnant from anal sex, Andrea?
Well, I think this is all about definitions, right? So, and perceptions. If someone's defined anal sex as a penis entering the anus, then the answer to that is no. But if someone defines other, activity taking place, or, is it possible that you could, ejaculate in the vicinity of a vaginal opening and that sperm gets in there and you get pregnant? Anything I suppose would be possible. But I think with what you guys are looking at as far as breaking it down a little bit more is really the question of how specific in this definition do you want to be? I can understand, Tanya, where you're coming from in regards to separating that out in some way. But you run the option here of basically getting very, very specific, which isn't a bad thing either. But I can't say, we can't say a lot of things in medicine are 100% certain typically. So, I think we are sort of flirting with disaster sometimes with this 100% effective statement anyway, right? Because in reality, in medicine, we most often never use that. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
Yeah, I guess because I hesitate to separate it because then I think we're splitting hairs over abstinence. When we say sex is touching another person's genitals to the mouth, the anus, I feel like we're splitting hairs. And then, for everyone that's going to tune out about abstinence simply because of the pregnancy, they'll be like, oh, I just will have oral and anal sex then. I feel like then it's taking away from, I feel like we're splitting hairs, and I would be afraid that we are not condoning, but saying that it's for all of you that are only afraid of pregnancy, you won't get pregnant if you do these other things. Which, if Andrea's already saying, that 100% effective, if I am nowhere near, if a vagina is nowhere near ejaculating fluids, I don't understand how we can't say it's an 100% way to avoid pregnancy. Like if your vagina is not near semen, I don't see how you could get pregnant, but I would be very, very leery about splitting it up too much.
And I'll just remind you and caution you that, remember, data and information tells us that by giving information, we're typically not going to influence someone to make a decision that they've already decided to do, right? So that goes back to that analogy of if a person has thought about suicide and you ask them as a healthcare provider, have you thought about suicide? Data shows us that we're not going to give them ideas. And I typically use that analogy when we talk about giving information about sexual health or anything like that. I mean, the more knowledge that we give someone, if they've already decided to make a decision that instead of having penile vaginal sex, they're going to have oral sex, typically this type of information isn't going to necessarily influence that. However, the more information they have, the better. And so, I mean, I want to make sure that, we use that sort of frame of mind when we think about giving information, is that, we're not here to persuade one way or the other. We're here as to give information so that people can make their own choices, which typically, even by this age, they've already started making. So,
okay.
So I can see what you're saying. I just think that, we have to be cautious as a healthcare provider. I would never withhold information from a patient for fear they're going to make the choice that I think is incorrect.
Right. Okay. So, but Planned Parenthood, so I just Googled, can you get pregnant from anal sex? And it said, no, it's not possible to become pregnant from anal intercourse when the penis is inserted into a partner's anus, but pregnancy can occur if semen is spilled into the vagina or into the vulva during any kind of sex. So,
correct.
So I guess that's where I think it would be inappropriate for us to say, this is only going to prevent pregnancy with vaginal sex. I mean, I think that's a little, that makes me nervous. So unless we want to say vaginal, or there's a possibility with anal sex, and then I kind of wonder, what's the point? We're making it too wordy. But I don't know. That's just kind of what I'm thinking. I think we run the risk. If we say specifically vaginal sex, then we are not being honest with the teeny tiny population where semen might spill out.
Okay, Manny?
I do recall us also talking about how STIs and STDs can also be transmitted through other ways that don't actually require like sexual activity, unless, did we define kissing and stuff as sexual activity? I honestly cannot remember if we did or not.
I don't think so.
So just with that in mind, would it make sense if we turned the third bulletin to say abstinence is the most effective way to prevent sexual transmitted HIV, other sexual transmitted disease or infections in pregnancy? Because based on what you're saying, Kelly, and like some of the other discussions that we've had, even if you are abstaining, if you're kissing somebody, you could still potentially get an STI or STD just due to that transmission also.
What transmission?
Well, first one that comes to mind for me is herpes.
Tanya, can you say again what the 2 points are that you would like to see that bullet point be split into?
Yes, they would be: abstinence is the only 100% effective way to prevent sexually transmitted HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases or infections. And the other bullet point would be: abstinence from vaginal sex is the only 100% effective way to prevent pregnancy.
Thank you. So this is something we've stumbled over and grappled with a few times. I definitely agree, pregnancy and HIV are different. Like I like them. I definitely agree that they could be separated out. Do we have other thoughts on that logic or thoughts on this?
I don't mind it, Kelly wrote that for the record. I don't mind it being separated. I just think you're treading into dangerous waters by only saying vaginal sex.
I see. It's the vaginal sex.
Right. I mean, I think that since like, cause then it undercuts the whole purpose of the definition of abstinence. So, I mean, I guess if we were going to separate it and you want to say vaginal sex, then I would say that you would have to in some way put a disclaimer there that there are cases in which you could become pregnant, you know, like Planned Parenthood did, you know, like I think you would have to put that disclaimer or we're not being truthful in every single lesson because this is repeated so many times.
I think that's a great point that we're discussing something that would be changing in all of the definition and all the grade levels.
So I don't mind the bullet point. I just mind that like making it so narrow.
Okay. I definitely hear that, Kelly.
And I guess the narrowness was my whole point for it. But if we are going to be like, oh, there could be a little sperm somewhere, then it could be true, I suppose, with oral sex too. If you had oral sex one way and then you kissed and you had oral sex the other way, like, I guess, you know, if we're thinking that something could happen, super unlikely, but could happen, then I take the point that my whole little objection to how it's phrased maybe is a moot point. Maybe it's not so bad after all. I was always just thinking that vaginal sex is how you get pregnant, but if there's a teeny tiny chance of things going everywhere from other kinds of sex, then maybe it needs to stay. I just am always struck by this slide. I'm always looking at it thinking, are we saying you can get pregnant from oral sex? And it always just bothers me, but
I definitely agree with that. And Tanya, let's listen. Yeah, I definitely agree that we would be inaccurate in teaching oral sex causes pregnancy, right? Like that would be. So I definitely take your thoughts on that. Sarah Kaiser?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm still committed to this, but I'll ask it anyway. I'm sitting here pondering our audience. That's where I am, is trying to figure out, you know, who's reading this, who is this for? I will say that I get a little twitchy if we start to think about adding a lot more words, because I think the more convoluted it gets, in many ways, the less effective it is for our audience of kids. But Tanya, maybe can you help me with your logic about why this distinction is necessary? I get your logic. I see your logic, your logical argument, but why is it necessary? What are you worried about that it's going to do if we don't switch it out?
Good question. I guess I'm worried about ill-informed young kids thinking that you can get pregnant in ways that you can't, and that we're telling them that by showing this slide in that way. So I guess I'm worried about us not being truthful, I guess is the issue, to answer your question.
Thank you.
Okay, and I really appreciate your thought put into this, because we want our kids to have the best education possible.
And I completely agree. And Andrea, I didn't think like I wasn't going we've mentioned it, so they'll do it. So much that I just really don't like the idea, if there is that possibility, that we're telling them there isn't. And so that's where I get twitchy. But I am also, Sarah, with you when I say I don't want to add extra words necessarily, but I feel like if we do make a separation, there will have to be a disclaimer, or else I don't feel comfortable because it's in all the lessons.
Manny?
So just thinking about like what you were saying, Sarah, where we're talking about the wordiness. If we're looking at the definition of abstinence, if you really look at like how we define abstinence, that third bullet point almost is kind of irrelevant to the definition. We define what abstinence is. We define how somebody can be abstinent even if they may have had sex. But then adding that abstinence is the only effective way to prevent HIV, STIs, STDs, and pregnancy. That doesn't really go with the definition of abstinence. It just is kind of add on to it. If that makes sense.
Can I pipe in there? That was a huge source of contention, if I'm remembering it correctly. Those of you who've been around for a while, that we actually, I'm remembering nights of a lot of public comment and such, and there were members of the community and then members of our previous share committee composition who were very adamant that that third bullet made it on there, and to the extent that it wouldn't have passed without it. And so just a little bit of context and history, I don't know a few years later or what, but that bullet, my recollection, I remember we were at like DePoli Middle School or something that night, and it was long and it was drawn out, I feel like. But that maybe other people remember differently. I don't know.
No, it took us multiple meetings to do it. And I think, that was a huge portion. I think it would be, I love updates, but I always feel like it's a little bit unfair to like, not just necessarily say, oh, well, we have a massively different committee, or, like we don't have the public comment that led to that, to just be like, oh, and we're done with that now. I don't know. But yeah, Lydia, I remember. Yeah, definitely.
So that's why it's there, Manny.
I can't see. Is there somebody else in line ahead of me? I can't see your. This is Sarah Kaiser.
It's you, Sarah Kaiser.
Okay. So Manny, I agree with you. As a communication person, that third bullet point is not part of the definition of abstinence. I'm happy to go on the record saying it's a commentary on abstinence. I do recall all of these other things about this. My concern about changing this, quite frankly, is I am worried that if we go back and try to change this to be a little more accurate about to prevent people from thinking that maybe you could get pregnant from genital contact or oral sex or something, I'm a little worried that we might go back and undo all of the previous lessons that have already passed, because they passed with this definition. So I think before we act in any way on this, I would like to understand how this would impact previous lessons that have passed and are ready to go, to the kids. I would want to understand that before I voted on this.
I think they just are automatically updated. Rochelle?
Yes, it would just be a change. And, just to add on to Sarah, I don't know if this is adding on or a tangent, but when we have, especially in high school, I remember we had great discussion about this definition and student definition of abstinence, because an individual's definition of abstinence might not follow these bullet points, right? And we had it as a talking point too, that you needed to make sure that you discuss with you and your partner what your definitions of abstinence were. So breaking away just from our Washoe County School District definition, and I even think we had like a Webster's definition in there too, just as another source. I just, we've talked about it. So that's why I put it, and working with Ashley too, we brought it back on the agenda because it has been brought up several times. And, it's up to you guys. I wanted to bring it up since it has been a topic of conversation over the past several meetings and before that. And it was discussed at that meeting or those meetings 3 years ago that perhaps this definition would come back at some point. And so here it is. And discussion's up to you guys. So
yeah, and I really appreciate that, Rochelle. Thank you. And I think it really is important to continue to review it because it can be a guidepost as we move through, updates. Once we finish with the rest of the grade levels, the idea is this committee will move forward and do updates in this definition. If it needed to be updated, would then help guide those revisions or updates. Okay, do we have further discussion? Luis, is there any public comment on this item? I didn't hear you, Luis, but I'm going to assume you said no. I can see you shaking your head no, but I still can't hear you. But we'll take the no. Thank you.
So is the next step?
Cannot hear you. Cannot hear you, sir. Maybe we'll need to get the names of general comment. A little bit.
Very, very low.
oh, he disappeared.
Okay. So we'll just remember those names of public commenters when it comes time.
I
Tanya,
don't
was that
have,
you?
I'm looking at my share email right now, and I have the only public comments I've received are the ones he referenced that are going to go into the general comment. I don't have any others that he would have forwarded us.
Thanks, Kelly, for checking. I appreciate that. I just really appreciate this conversation around this. Thank you all for that. Tanya, thank you very much for making sure that we took a look at it. Is there anything else that we need discussed here? Okay.
So what are we going to do in terms of this? Do we want to just keep it how it is, or do we want to look at potentially revising this? Because I personally am not one that says just because we did something one way means it has to stay that way. We should be able to adapt to the times. And if this is if our definition of it is no longer adequate, we should change it so that it is adequate to what is actually beneficial to the kids.
Sure. If there's a motion, then I'm willing to entertain it. But otherwise, I think we can. No motion right now does not mean it's the end of the discussion. It means we would not be bringing it up every time we look at another lesson, but it would mean that, this committee is committed to, I think the district is committed to bringing that up the same as this committee will be looking at everything else in the future. That's putting a lot of words in many other people's mouths. But I'm just saying.
So Kelly Roper, for the record, Manny, I understand, and I am not completely opposed to change, but I am opposed to completely removing it without seeing where it is in context of the other lessons, because I know, like, I have this memory of when Tanya's brought it up these last couple messages. I would personally like to be able to look back, and I don't have them with me right now because I don't. I'm on a little card table, but I would like to be able to see if we are going to take that out, where they fall. Like, does that take anything out from the lesson that we would need to make sure was still there? So, as far as a motion to remove it right now, I would just ask, if that's where many of you think we're going, could we wait until we see where it falls into the lesson, so we're not making a change without information? The definition is in front of us, but where it falls in the lessons and how it is referenced in the lesson is not in front of us. So I would just like to ask if maybe we could make that choice when we can reference where it is at.
So as far as my point that I'm trying to bring up is, I don't get a feel of where people are at. And I guess, I don't know, should I be making a motion with my suggestion and then we can just go from there? because my suggestion wasn't to remove it at this point. It was just to split up those bullet points. But I've never made a whole separate motion away from what we were already, discussing. So I'm not sure. Can I get some guidance on what would be a good plan of action?
My motions are always a problem, so I don't have any advice for you at all. But Sarah, did you have?
Yeah, I can just tell you where I am in this discussion right now. I don't think I'm ready to vote on this. I think I would have to abstain because I'm not sure how it does impact. I don't disagree with what you're suggesting, Tanya, at all. And nor do I disagree, Manny, that we shouldn't change things that aren't working. I really do think we need to do that. But right now, I just don't know how it fits in the big picture. And I'm not exactly sure how we would change it. I think we need to have some discussion. I mean, this is a good conversation and I'd like to see it come back. But tonight, I don't know where I would go with it. So that's just where I personally am at this moment.
That's very helpful. Anyone else have any such feedback?
I got a question actually for Rochelle on this. I want to get some clarification. You guys made this definition of abstinence 3 years ago, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Now, does that definition get put into all the new lessons, or does that definition of abstinence get put into all the previous lessons also?
This definition was discussed, constructed by the committee before I came forward with high school curriculum, the high school curriculum that is now in use, the most up to date, right? That went into practice last school year, right? And this year was 8th grade. So does that give you some context, Manny, as far as when this definition came up? Because since you're teaching, Cher, you know what the definition currently is in elementary school, correct?
Yeah. Yes, that's why I was asking, because the definition that we see is completely different than this.
It's completely different. But again, you're teaching from 2003. So your curriculum that you're teaching, the last time it was updated or revamped or rebuilt or discussed was technically 2003 with any big changes, right? Kelly? And so, go.
Yeah. Rochelle, can I jump in real quick, Kelly?
Yeah.
When we were doing this agenda item, I anticipated this being an issue. And so I put the possibility that the for an action item, that if you guys were to revise the definition of abstinent, that definition would apply to all the shared curriculum referencing the definition of abstinence. So that's a possibility in the agenda item.
So glad you put that in there, Sarah.
I am so glad that you put that in there.
When we were doing,
go ahead, Kelly.
Back when we were doing high school, we started, when Rochelle first started, we were maybe going to revamp the old curriculum. And so she had like the health teacher cadre that was looking at things. And so we basically had meetings where we weren't able to necessarily talk about what was happening yet because the health teachers hadn't given us input. So we did this. One of the things that we could do was decide, well, what do we think is the definition of abstinence, since we didn't have curriculum to deal with. So that was also one of the reasons why so much time was spent on it, because we didn't have any other stuff to talk about. But maybe it's a valid point to bring up, Manny, because you were like, we're going to very quickly be going into elementary school. I do distinctly remember talking about it and wanting vaginal, oral, and anal sex to be mentioned. But a lot of us in that conversation did ask, and we're kind of like, what happens when we get to elementary school? This is kind of brutally harsh for 4th and 5th graders. And I remember, Rochelle, you saying that we could, not brutally harsh, but you were saying it could be different for the elementary school levels. And maybe Manny's like, no, it should stay exactly the way it is. But I remember that being something that I didn't know.
That was it. Yeah.
I don't know how you all remember this stuff. I can't. It's so long ago. So here is the thought. Looking at our elementary school counselors saying, yeah, definitely we need this information there. Definitely hearing that it's not necessarily accurate to keep STIs and pregnancy together. Still hearing, that we don't want to single out vaginal sex as the only way that pregnancy happens. What if we separated out the bullet point, and Tanya, remind me, the STIs being the first part? Yes. Okay. And the second part being abstinence. But what if we just said just repeated, except for pregnancy is separate? Abstinence is the only 100% effective way to prevent pregnancy. And what if we updated all the grade levels?
And there's no change, right? So then we might as well keep it for simplicity. I don't see what separating it out does if we're not addressing the fact that you can't get pregnant from oral sex.
Pregnancy, comma, specifically vaginal sex.
Well, I guess the question is, are we saying that you can only get pregnant from vaginal sex, or?
No, I think you can say abstinence is the only 100% effective way to prevent now my meeting changed. Oh, there, thank you for pulling up the words. Abstinence is the only 100% effective way to prevent pregnancy, comma, particularly vaginal sex. Or abstinence, comma, particularly from vaginal sex, comma, is the only 100% effective way. So I don't know. I just feel like it just feels like an opportunity to jump on.
What if you said particularly vaginal sex, but not excluding anal sex?
But seriously.
Oh my.
I think we're getting into the part where Sarah Kaiser is talking about that we might be getting a little too wordy on there in terms of them following along with us at that point.
All right, what do you want it to say, Manny? Or do you want to wait?
I'm not going to pretend. Actually, honestly, I'd rather just remove it and just be straightforward, because any definition is better than the definition that we're currently using, at least in elementary school, as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
But can I ask, what if we're going to remove it, can we have a chance to look and see? I mean, like, if I'm not comfortable with the motion for it right now for the same reason Sarah said she wasn't. Is there any way, like, if we're going to remove it, can we see it in context of lessons? And I hate to say, can we bring it up next month, but can we bring it up next month thinking like it either stays the way it is or we remove that bullet point, but we want to see it in context first?
So perhaps the January meeting? Is that what you're saying, Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, but like through the filter of we either do nothing or we remove the third bullet point, but you show us in context where it falls in the lessons before we remove a bullet point.
It falls at the very end of every lesson that talks about it. I'm looking through at least all the lessons right now.
You're talking about elementary, Kelly, or you're referring to all the curriculum we've written so far, correct?
Yeah, I'm referring to high school
and 8th grade
and and
7th grade that we have so far.
Yeah.
Yeah, Rochelle, could you, because I'm just thinking logistically for this, I don't know how you would present that. If that was going to be the motion, would you present every single lesson? Because I know every single lesson defines abstinence in your lessons, correct?
Right.
So to Kelly's point, I think she's just basically the change would just be on that slide, the definition would just be different.
The definition would be different. And I think Kelly's concerned about the actual context of that definition and how it's fitting into the lesson, correct?
Yes,
Not
because I mean,
informed.
I think part of the spirit of why that's there in the first place is something that's very dear to my heart, in that a lot of this is factual and a lot of this is super good information for kids, but there's very, very little motivation for abstinence, right? Like there's no, like there's so much of these lessons are like, well, abstinence is great, but like all this other information, which I'm not disagreeing with, but I mean, just to put out there to kids, it's a great thing, you know, like emotionally, physically, you know, like I mean, to me, I feel like that is there's very little focus on that aspect of abstinence, and how, you know, like we talked last month about how, you know, some of those things that I disagreed with were great because it provided opportunities for people to be intimate without, you know, actually having physical sex. And I think there's so little focus on people's emotional well-being when that's off the table. And so I just feel like the spirit of a lot of the people that wanted that sentence was to say, this is a great thing because all of these things that will not happen to you and you won't have to deal with when you are abstinent, you know? And so I think, I don't know, we'll just.
I appreciate you explaining further and sharing with us where you're sitting with that. Thank you. And you're not the only person in the community. You know, there were a lot of people who were, that was, I think, maybe the second time I was escorted out by police. So I love these Zoom meetings, you guys. Anyway, I have a thought, but I'd like to hear from Lydia.
Oh, I'm just wondering, if we table this to the January meeting, do we have to have like a full presentation of every place it shows up, or can we just all count on each other that those of us who want to see it in context can go to our binders or the website and we can look it up ourselves and come in a little bit more prepared to make an informed decision for those that's important to do.
I appreciate
not
that.
saying that Rochelle has to put together a whole presentation of every single time and place that this occurs, because we know it's in there a lot.
Right. During your winter break, Rochelle.
I know, right?
If that's a possibility, then I think that's where I would lean right now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And that's definitely where I'm leaning. However, I really feel like we can move this current definition to elementary school and then come back in January and review a definition that could possibly apply to all the grade levels again. And I would like to do that now. Sarah.
Can I clarify that you're meaning move this definition into the existing curriculum that elementary school is teaching even before we revise the whole thing? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes. Sarah Montalvo, that's something that this motion allows?
No, I was going to just comment on that. That the language in the action item says that you would apply the revised definition to all the Washoe County School District shared curriculum, referencing the definition of abstinence.
Well, I think we should revise it to have an additional bullet point then.
And I do just want to comment to Lydia's point. I hope I made it clear beforehand. It would be very difficult for us logistically to go through all of the lesson plans so you could see it in context, because I believe it shows up. It's a common thread because it's the main point, stepping stone and of the shared curriculum. And so I think logistically, it would be very problematic for us to try to create an agenda item with that premise without having some open meeting law issues. So it would be very challenging for me and Rochelle to try to present that without running afoul of some open meeting law issues.
Okay, thank you.
Could we just make a motion to add this to continue this discussion at the next at our next meeting. Is that how that works? And that way people can just look on their own if they wanted to.
Sarah Montalvo.
You could make that motion if that's what you wanted to do. It would, so then nothing would happen. And I just, that motion would need to be clear that it's not being premised on the presentation of all of the curriculum in terms of where it lands and how it applies for all of the curriculum or absence definition.
Thank you.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay. Ashley, I think I'm also with you though, in the sense that I would like us to maybe look at, even if it's modifying it just enough that we could actually put this into that elementary school definition, since the agenda item allows for that. I would like us to potentially do that, and then if we come back in January to revisit it, I'm totally okay with that, because I mean, if somebody presents this between now and then, I want to make sure that they have that updated definition as opposed to the very, very, very outdated definition that we have.
But I don't think, Kelly Roper, for the record, and this is Sarah Montalvo, you'll have to source it here. I don't think that's possible, because it says, the verbiage on the agenda says, the language of the definition and apply the revised definition to all Washoe County shared curriculum, referencing the definition of abstinence, because it's always like abstinence, Washoe County School District definition of abstinence. And that's not in elementary school yet.
It is.
But this one isn't, like this particular one isn't. Right.
That's true.
I'm just making sure, because we would be saying, if we change it, I think we're only changing it for 7th grade, 8th grade, and 9th grade, where we've put this definition, and this definition, it's not written back, changed so that it can be added. Like, remember Rochelle's agenda item was specifically for the stopgap for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. Like, I don't know. That's just what I would be afraid that if we think we're putting it in elementary school, we can't yet.
Sarah Montalvo, do you know if would that allow us to add this to the elementary school curriculum, or is Kelly correct on that, and it would only change to what's been discussed since the new definition has been there?
The way I read this is, and the way it was drafted, was anytime a Washoe County School District shared curriculum references a definition of abstinence, that if you decided to revise it today, that definition would be revised in all of the curriculum which references a definition. So if you have a slide that says, this is the definition of abstinence, it would apply to all of those curriculums. So that would also then apply to elementary school, because it was drafted to apply to have it the newly revised definition to be uniform throughout the shared curriculum.
Okay. Yeah, so then understanding that, then I would agree with Ashley then that I think we should look at looking at some type of revision to it so that this can be uniformly applied to all the curriculum.
Louise, have we received public comment on this item?
Good question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, excellent. No, we have not received public comment.
Okay, thank you. Rabbi Benjamin Zober, were you saying goodnight to someone? Okay.
Can we see the definition again, Rochelle?
Sure.
Can you zoom in just a little bit? I'm sorry, I don't want to put my face like right up against my camera. Thank you.
Is that better? I can make
Yes.
it bigger.
Thank you. Sarah Kaiser.
So I have an idea for a stopgap revision, possibly. We've got that bullet point under bullet point. We've got the sub bullet point about sex. What if we added an additional bullet point under sex that said something to the effect of pregnancy results from vaginal sex? Would this address your question for the moment, Tanya?
Yes.
But then it would,
It would not work for you, Callie. Is that what I'm?
well, right, because the tiny percentage where it doesn't, it's not valid, that,
Well, pregnancy most commonly most commonly as a results from sex or something.
Yeah, I like that. One of the things I like about that, Andrea, you can go in just a second, but one of the things that I like about that, Lydia, is Kelly, you still have that abstinence, the one, the main bullet point, the last main bullet point, not the little sub one with sex. That is all still there, and we're not changing that in any way. That still is going to include the, it's a risk. Those are risks, right? Okay, Andrea? Or did you
No,
have
it was fine. I was just correcting a 3-year-old. You're fine.
Oh.
So Lydia.
And
you
sorry,
say
can I
that-
jump in, you guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
As my baby's crying in the background.
That's okay.
I wanted to clarify to Lydia's point. There's nothing on the agenda that allows you to specify any like revision back to Rochelle to put on a future agenda item like we do for lessons. So either it passes tonight with a revision or it doesn't pass. You can't make any specifics on like on a future agenda item because that's not agendized. I just wanted to make that clear in case I don't think I clarified that very well when Lydia asked that question.
Thank you for following up with that.
So Lydia, go back to Lydia, what you were saying about, you were talking about most commonly, but were you leaving the 3 bullet points and then adding something? What were you saying?
Yeah, so it would just be what Sarah Kaiser just said. Add another sub bullet point right after where it says sex and the definition of sex, and just one more bullet point there that says pregnancy most commonly, I don't know if that's grammatically correct, but pregnancy most commonly occurs as a result of vaginal sex or because pregnancy can occur.
Most commonly occurs
Sex at all,
from
right?
vaginal sex.
Some cases. Pregnancy most commonly occurs from vaginal sex, period.
Andrea, is that medically accurate? Pregnancy most commonly
Repeat
occurs
that one
from
more
vaginal-
time.
Pregnancy most commonly occurs from or results from vaginal sex.
Yes.
Thank you.
I think results from is better than occurs, which we are kicking around.
Okay.
I liked when you said that, Ashley.
Thanks. You can buy me some Little Caesars pizza to celebrate. Okay. Further thoughts?
I like that too, because it speaks to my point without taking away the tiny, tiny, tiny risk of getting pregnant from semen everywhere in other ways, I suppose. Splash fest.
I feel ridiculous for that being something, but I know it's teeny, 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 but
yeah,
I appreciate being able to at least say it that way. Lydia, I thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Excellent. Okay. I'm going to ask one more time if there's been public comment on this item. Luis.
All right.
Can I ask for some clarification real quick? Just for my own, as I'm beginning to roll into 6th, 5th, and 4th grade, right? Because technically we finished 7th grade. So the hope is, well, it's on the calendar to go to the board in shortly. But as we roll into 6th, 5th, and 4th, are we under the same thought? We are going to continue with this definition. That's what I'm getting, right? Is that what you were saying, Manny, too?
From my understanding, I was saying for the time being, we work with this definition, and then after we're done looking at all of our curriculum, then we could come back and revisit this stuff, revisit it. So that way we at least have the updated definition in the elementary curriculum.
Okay, and we cannot make a motion directing when there will be further discussion on this.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, Louise, to drag you in. All right, is there further comment?
No
Okay,
additional
thank
public
you.
comment.
Thank you. Okay, Rochelle?
And just important to note, Manny, this, whatever comes about after this evening, this would still have to go to the board for approval.
Of course it does.
I just want you to know that. So, because yeah, it's just another, right? It's our steps that we have to do.
Yeah.
That anything that has to do with share, whether it's a change in verbiage, right? Because we're looking at then, this isn't the lesson that we're talking about specifically tonight, but it's then going into play in all of our lessons that we've even already created. So just wanted to make sure you were clear on that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'll try a motion.
Go
But
for it.
before I do, Tanya, I want to make sure we're not changing any existing verbiage. It's just that bullet point that's getting added.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah, that's a
Okay.
good enough
Awesome.
compromise for me. Yeah.
Okay, so Kelly Roper, for the record, I would like to make a motion to amend the definition, the Washoe County School District definition of abstinence, to add a sub-bullet below the one about sex, saying pregnancy most commonly results from vaginal sex.
And to clarify, Kelly, do you want the remainder of the language in the proposed motion that it would apply to all Washoe County School
Yes,
Districts?
and that it would, and I would like this to apply to all the lessons that have already been newly written, as well as elementary school.
So anywhere the district currently defines
Yes.
abstinence.
Where the district currently defines abstinence.
Okay. Nice work. Do we have a second?
I'll second that, Tanya Hayes. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Tanya. Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so on motion by Kelly Roper and second by Tanya Hayes, our recommendation to the board passes unanimously. Very well done, everyone. Very well done. Oof. Even in the middle of everyone saying goodnight to their household. I've had three people come in. Okay. Oops. I've lost my spot in my agenda. So you need to just give me a minute, please.
We are in the closing items now.
Thank you. Are we in the closing items? 3 point something?
3.01.
01. There we go. Okay. So could we hear public comment, Luis? General public comment?
All right. So we received public comment from Lee Newman and Kathy Simon Holland.
Thank you, Luis. And we were all emailed those earlier. I really appreciate Katie Simon, trustee Katie Simon, reaching out to our committee. She knows what she's talking about with hard work and sacrifice for our community. Okay. So 3.02, announce our next meeting will be Monday, January 11th. Okay, so we're not going to be meeting in December. And here we are at 7:51, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, so much.